My name is Eric Ansart. I work with Lympha Press, and this morning we're happy to have Kristen Law with us. Kristen, in just a moment, I'll ask you to share a little of your professional qualifications, but before we get started, I wanted to just welcome everybody this morning and talk about our subject material. So today we're going to be discussing the 5 lessons that world-class athletes have learned from the lymphatic community. You know, a lot of times professional athletes tend to be on the cutting edge of technology. And when it comes to treating chronic edema and sports recovery, the professional athletic world has actually learned quite a bit from the lymphatic world. So today we're going to talk about those things, and we're really just going to address 5 points that we can, I think we could all learn and hopefully take home some good information. You know, Chris and I both have a passion for patient care, and we really want to be able to provide whatever tools we potentially can for patients for the long-term management of these conditions. So before we get started, I wanted to thank the team over at the LE&RN Education and Research Network. The Lymphatic Education and Research Network has done a tremendous job of reaching directly out to patients to be a platform for education, and we really appreciate what they've done over the last couple of years specifically in really helping us be able to have a voice with the patient community. Kristen and I have known each other for, what's it, about 10 years now, Kristen?
Probably about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've always been impressed with her level of understanding of these devices and just a real broad understanding of what, good treatment options. And let's just take a minute, Kristen, if you could share some of your background with the audience.
Okay. I began treating lymphedema and became certified about 9 years ago. And initially started out in a cancer center. Obviously did not use a lot of compression devices where I was. And then gradually moved on to other facilities that tended to treat more complex patients.
Right.
Often with comorbidities such as, obesity, often with wounds. And that's where I got more into and exposed to a lot of the devices and seeing the benefit of them in both phases of treatment. So in the initial phase and also long-term, seeing where not only did we see an improvement as far as the wound healing, but also how quickly the gains could be made as far as reduction and then just long-term potential as far as management.
That's great. And I know a lot of people on the call today are dealing with the challenges of managing lymphedema long-term. So this morning, hopefully we'll be able to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the things that you've learned over the last 10 years in some of the different facilities you've worked with. One of the things that I'd like to start with is there's a picture here of Meredith Kessler. She's a professional triathlete. And she's actually won 5 races this year, which is an incredible feat. For those of you who aren't familiar with triathlons, you're biking, riding, and running, and each of those can be a 100-mile bike ride, 26-mile run, and multiple mile swim. And she's an incredible athlete and is actually expected, or I don't think you can ever predict these things, but she's expected to do very well at the Kona event, which is really the premier event this year. And one of the things that she's used is pneumatic compression for the treatment of her post-workout edema. And one of the things that we've really recognized is there is I believe a move in professional athletics as well as patient care to be more open-minded, I think, towards using some of these alternative methods and devices for the treatment of these conditions. Kristen, would you agree, or what are your thoughts on how the industry has kind of changed over the last couple of years when it comes to the use of pneumatic compression?
I think we have a lot more options than we did in the past. The initial pumps, they were often single chamber, and they had a lot of issues that came about just with either developing fibrotic cuffs or discomfort as far as the pressures. And then even as far as what I was taught initially in becoming lymphedema certified, you learn that all pumps are bad. They cause all of these issues. They're going to damage the delicate lymphatics. But what we're finding now, a lot of the research, they're showing that it actually is helping not only with the long-term management, but that it's not causing this damage to those lymphatics. in the pressures that we originally thought would actually cause them to either collapse or shut down, and the fluid is actually moving through that area. So I think as far as what's out in the literature and what studies are showing and why people are having a more open take on this as an option for
Right.
management, it's just that more of the studies are showing in the medical community seems to be more willing to see that this is an option. It is something that could be used as a tool for everyone.
Right.
Um, and it's something that with the new designs, people are a lot more comfortable with.
That's great. And, I think I, when people are challenged with anything, right, the goal is really to give them as many tools as potentially they could have or need to be
Right.
able to live the best quality of life. And, nobody is advocating pneumatic compression as an end-all treatment for anybody. Professional athletes don't use pneumatic compression as the only form of treatment. There are a lot of other options, and we're going to talk about that a little bit this morning. But when you do talk about the professional athletic world, there's definitely a recognition of the benefit of using pneumatic compression as a part and using these Lympha Press garments and compression devices as a part of their recovery tool. So, and that's really something that they've learned. Here's a couple of really interesting quotes. So here's Curtis Mitchell. He's the 2014 200-meter champion for running. And he actually says here, if you're really serious about your sport and train hard like me, I absolutely recommend Recovery Pump. Recovery Pump is a recovery version of the same type of tools that we would use, pneumatic compression devices, in the patient aspect. And he actually says here, it will boost your performance and take you to the next level. We have one of the head athletic trainers for the Diamondbacks. Most of our players use the recovery arm, which is a device that we're going to talk about here this morning. And actually, the guys that use it immediately go out and use it immediately before they go out to the field. They say it gets them ready for the game and relaxes tight muscles. Stephen Curry, for those of you who are basketball fans, this is a real common name and a household name right now. Stephen Curry had a great season last year, and they actually, Golden State Warriors, won the season. And he says here, thanks to Recovery Pump for giving me fresh legs. But the one I really wanted to focus on, and this is one of my favorites, is this is from a woman, she's actually a patient of ours. Her name is Sybil, and she's in Florida. And she says, the device is a miracle worker. Thank you so much, and I'll forever be grateful for your service. So one of the things that we've recognized with pneumatic compression is, like I said, pneumatic compression isn't an end-all in therapy. It's something that you as a patient should utilize and become more educated on. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But the goal here is everybody being able to bring their A game to the table. Whether it's Stephen Curry or some of the other athletes that we just quoted, they're every day trying to be the best that they can possibly be for that day. So they're using some of these tools for the ongoing treatment. And I think what we're talking about this morning is incorporating the Lympha Press products into the treatment for patients. So many professional athletes are using compressions as a way to enhance their performance. And probably a lot of you have seen it. You see these athletes, even weekend warriors like myself. You're out there running and you've got compression wraps on to help venous return, and you're using pneumatic compression at the end of a long run or ride to be able to recover faster. Well, patients can use the same type of compression and have been really for decades to enhance their quality of life. So when we talk about really bringing your A game, our goal here is not just to educate you on the use of a device, but to give you a tool for the long-term management of your condition. So how does compression work? So research has shown that patients with more resources to treat their conditions have better long-term results. Kristen, you mentioned that briefly when we were just talking, some of the research and how it's kind of changed over the last decade or so. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that's applied to what you're doing in the clinic?
Oftentimes when I see a person initially, the biggest thing that we're doing anyway as lymphedema therapists we're assessing that tissue and we're seeing what the needs are of the patient. In a standard clinic that maybe doesn't use compression devices, your main tool is your hands.
Right.
If you have a person, I should say your hands, and obviously involved in the bandaging too. But when you have a person who's had maybe long-standing edema, they have skin changes, it could be fibrotic and hard. Sometimes it can even just have this rubbery feel.
Right.
A lot of times with that, manual lymph drainage alone isn't really going to be able to affect those tissues as much as maybe my compression device will. So, as far as assessing someone and seeing what I could actually use for them, I do consider it another tool that I can help to soften those tissues a little bit faster so that my hands can actually be more effective. I'm using my bandages to help soften at the same time. So I'm actually seeing faster results by incorporating it. Um, with that, I can also test to see if it is a device that someone likes and might be able to use at home. With a lot of the different designs that are out there, I can see if a 4 chamber versus an 8 chamber versus a 12 chamber, just to kind of see what's going to be the best fit for them for home.
Right.
So they also know, that this is an option, this is what it feels like, this is what you'll have, and they know that this is something that they can use. And people tend to be a little bit, I hate to say more compliant, but if they know that what they're getting is what they've already used in clinic, it's
Right.
worked, they can see the results. I think long term people are more likely to stay with something and really use everything at their disposal so that they don't have these issues recur again.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's something that we've recognized over the last 20 years of being in business is that, and Lympha Press has been around for literally decades as a worldwide leader in pneumatic compression. But over probably the last 10 years or so, we've recognized that more and more therapists are recognizing the benefit of pneumatic compression kind of as an adjunct therapy to what they're doing in clinic. And I've even seen some therapists where they'll use it on, on a patient's arm while they, massage a different part of the patient's body, or if it's a patient has, lower extremity edema, maybe using a sleeve on one leg and then using your hands on the other and then switching at some point, just to help as part of the treatment regimen.
Right.
So the second point, so first being that pneumatic compression does work, it helps you bring your A game to the table every day. And really this is a quality of life benefit here. The products that we're talking about help manage the conditions so that you can bring your A game to the table every day. The second thing is you don't want to settle for last year's technology. I'm sure all of you recognize there's not an athlete out there that's going to wear last year's shoes or last year's braces or anything like that. And in the medical technology space where things are continually adapting and changing, you want to make sure that if you need to and you're using a device like a pneumatic compression pump, that you're not settling for old technology. Kristen mentioned in the very beginning some of the old technology were these single chamber garments where it was very difficult and actually really impossible to control any kind of gradient or sequence to the compression. So one of the things that is a very important portion of using pneumatic compression is making sure that some of these points are covered, making sure that you have overlapping cell technology. This is going to eliminate, and the Lympha Press device, there's kind of a granulated picture there unfortunately, but it was the best shot that I had of a good picture of the inside of a Lympha Press garment. And one of the things that we've found that works very well is each chamber actually overlaps the chamber below by about 30%. So you're having a systematic approach where each chamber is overlapping the one above it, and you have no tenting or gapping in between chambers. That sounds like a very technical concern, but Kristen, from your perspective, is that something that patients actually recognize and can feel the difference?
I think that they can. And I think it's not only a difference as far as what they can feel, but sometimes visually they can see that between devices, a device that has those overlapping chambers, just like you said, you don't get that tenting in between.
Right.
Sometimes there's very obvious ridges in some devices, and when you're trying to help someone and you take this device off of them and they have these ridges, you're supposed to be making them better, and then they see something that should not look like that.
Right.
But yes, it definitely is a comfort issue, and I do see the difference with that more of a consistent feel up the leg. Just one more thing, just about the fibrotic tissue that
Absolutely.
with that, another important point as far as having those overlapping chambers, what studies have also found is that with that fibrotic tissue, a lot of these heavier pressures are actually absorbed by that fibrotic tissue. So they
Interesting.
can be absorbed by up to 20%. So if you're setting it at 50, what the person's actually feeling in under that fibrotic tissue is not at a 50 setting. So having something that's also comfortable so that you can kind of
Okay.
put this on and have these higher pressures just to affect those tissues better, and see that difference is very important.
That's great. That's great to know. I appreciate you. There's one thing to have a technical understanding of some of these things, but there's no way to replace actually experience in the field. So that's great to hear that. One of the things, another thing that we've recognized is, the Lympha Press device, and this is kind of when we talk about settling for last year's technology. Lympha Press has made a concerted effort over the years. Every couple of years they'll revamp, and they've revamped their technology, and they're very dedicated to research and development. And they've developed a lot of new therapies in some of their devices, which some of you may not even be aware that they're available. So I figured we would just cover that. Focus mode, for instance, is a great thing to be able to use. It's a setting in some of the new devices, and it actually allows you to focus the compression over a specific area if a patient has fibrotic tissue in that area. So if a patient has a very fibrotic, maybe a ring around the knee area, we can actually go through standard compression and then go back at the end of that and focus in that area to help break down the fibrotic tissue. The Lympha Press devices are also able to be used bilaterally, which is a huge time saver. If you're using a device that's maybe a unilateral setup and you're having to switch legs and use it on the other leg after you've used it for 1 hour on the first leg, or maybe alternate days, being able to do bilateral compression, I think, is a good benefit for the right patient. Unique, this is actually ancillary, and Kristen, you actually caught that in the edits, and I didn't change it here, but this should be axillary compression, which means that it actually provides compression underneath the arm for patients who are dealing with upper extremity lymphedema, where it may have moved into the chest wall or above the shoulder. And this area is quite common for patients underneath the armpit to end up with some swelling there. Kristen, are you familiar with the devices that actually treat the chest wall and some of the axilla area?
Not so much with the new device, but I did use the other one a bit more often. And pretty much any device, I'm going to want something that's going to clear that axillary area and the chest area, simply because you don't want that fluid collecting. So it very much, I don't want to say it mimics manual lymph drainage, but as far as the pathways that we use, that's one of the most important areas that we want to have good contact and good clearance with,
Right.
so that you're really optimally draining through there and not causing any other issues where that compromised location is because of either lymph node removal or radiation treatment.
Okay, great, thank you. So here are a couple of other, we'll just show you the quick Lympha Press family. So these are the devices that you can see, very modern looking. I have a device, the top right here, the PCD52. It's just a couple of pounds, very small, has a handle, very easy to move around for those of you who are patients and might be considering getting something like this. Some of the technology types that are available, you can do peristaltic setting, which is pictured here in the top photo. And then if you look at the bottom photo, this is more of a sequential setting, which holds the entire limb while we're going through the compression cycle. And we can get into some of these things in more detail at another time. We're going to have some of this information posted to our website as well as to our Facebook site, which we'll talk about towards the end of this presentation. The next thing, and this was something that Chris and I really talked about and felt like was a very important point, is success really takes teamwork. And athletes definitely know this. We mentioned Stephen Curry in the very beginning. Steph Curry is a tremendous three-point shooter and basketball player all around, great point guard. But he also understands no matter how good you are as an individual, you have to have a team to really be a success. And in the space of lymphedema, I think we all recognize that a winning team has to include good clinical oversight, somebody who's going to be a coach for you, your physical therapist being clinical and being that coach person often, a plan for long-term success, and then a support structure, family and friends and things like that. Kristen, I know this was a very important point for you. Did you want to talk a little bit about what you see a winning team being for these patients?
Yes, and I do. That's probably my biggest point. And anytime I have anyone in the clinic, usually it's a lot of teamwork, and that's a big point that I really push. Many people will say, it's the therapist's job. They've been doing this. They're the ones that are putting the bandages on. They're selecting the pump. But I always end up saying it's also the individual that is going through the day to day. They're doing their part.
Right.
They're wearing the compression, they're using the device, they're taking care of their skin, they're pretty much managing their condition. They're doing their follow-ups at 6 months. So that's why I do feel that it is a big team approach. And whether it's also, the therapist that's reaching out to the physician, if the patient has reached out before and hasn't really gotten a lot of feedback or needs more support in a certain area. But also just being able to provide as many tools that really are going to benefit both. Because as a therapist, and I think I had said to you at one point, I would rather see somebody for follow-ups, for new garments, just for a checkup, show them what the newest devices are, show them what the newest garments are. I don't want to see people for repeated regressions because they didn't have everything that they could possibly use just to manage their condition better. So I think, having those discussions, in the clinic, having really that back and forth conversation and knowing the person of, what's going to work. If someone cannot wear compression, is some compression better than nothing? And, maybe wearing something that's low grade, but having a compression pump that you could use 3 times a day for someone who might just be at home, that can even help to maintain a lot of that skin integrity that might otherwise break down into wounds or, just further skin changes.
Right. Great point. And, the pneumatic compression it's interesting because I think it's one of the tools that sometimes people just don't know are available to them. There's night garments that sometimes people aren't aware of. There's just the good quality garments. Sometimes people get stuck using garments just because they think it's their only option. So today's really about recognizing your team approach and really implementing whatever tools you can. Pneumatic compression and the Lympha Press device is just being a part of that. So the role of Lympha Press in your team. So Lympha Press fits in your long-term plan just a couple of ways that we'll mention. I believe the adjustability is a huge benefit to patients who are dealing with these conditions. Bilateral compression, which we talked about, the focus mode, and then the specialized garments is really something that I think is very important. You see here just a couple of garments that are available. This is the top right, you see the comfy sleeve. This is either an 8 or 12 chamber garment that inflates gradiently and sequentially, has special chambers that inflate in underneath the armpit area to help remove some of the edema and swelling in the upper arm and chest wall, and actually comes halfway across the chest wall and crosses over the sternum to help some of that proximal clearing and decongestion. The garment you see here to the left is called our ProFit. This is a progressively fitting sleeve. This is for the patients who may have edema, lower extremity edema, where it's difficult to manage, and maybe there's some lobules or misshaping to the leg, and they really want to have focused compression on certain areas. These straps allow you to strap the compression and really customize the garments for best fit. And here are a couple of others. The top right, which is very popular with some of our patients, this is the LymphaPod. This is a in excess of 24 chambers. It's for patients who are dealing with issues of lymphedema where it's become very difficult to manage, and this is a great device for those patients. And then a couple of other pictures from some of the other garments that we also carry. So going over kind of back to our points, the last one is cycle and pressures are important. And Lympha Press device is completely adjustable based on the need and comfort. Rapid inflation, proximal clearing, these are all benefits that I think we can talk about at another time. But one of the things that we really want to emphasize with the viewers today is the need to really know where to go to receive this type of equipment. The Lympha Press, our product line, we're actually being distributed through an exclusive provider network throughout the country, but we work closely with your clinical staff. So ask the questions of your physical therapist, ask the questions of your doctor, ask if there are other things that could be used for the long-term management of your condition. We are big on education, and when we talked to the LE&RN organization and discussed what the goal of this presentation was today, it was really to create a call to action and really to inform and educate you as a patient on what your options are. So when we thought this through, I think the biggest call to action, the biggest thing that we could ask of you as a patient population is do what you can to educate yourself. You have to be your own advocate. We've moved more and more into a generation of people who understand and are very informed about what they're dealing with. So ask the questions, and here are just a couple of places that you can go. There's many more. The National Lymphedema Network is a great resource. Your local clinicians and physical therapists are a great resource. But follow the LE&RN Education Network. Follow Lympha Press. Go onto their Facebook pages. There's a lot of ongoing education that you can receive. But our ultimate goal is really to see and to hope and to be able to provide you with the tools that you need for your long-term management of these conditions. We really appreciate you being with us this morning. Kristen, thank you for taking some time with us today and sharing your expertise. Anything you would like to say to the group before we end today?
No, I think you ended it perfectly. I absolutely agree. I think there's so much that is out there in terms of compression and just being able to manage your condition that it is about getting out there and seeing what's there and being your own advocate and just going for what you need so that you can live a better quality of life because there's a lot that is out there.
You can't say it any better than that. It's
right.
all about living the best quality of life. So fantastic, everybody. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you very much, LE&RN Organization, for hosting us.